Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of Thursdays with Phillip on the Auburn Undercover podcast. Nathan King here, of course, every week with Mr. Phillip Marshall, our publisher Ronnie Sanders, joining us today as well. Phillip, a win over Kentucky is something Auburn has been used to over the years. They've sort of dominated that series, but this one felt a little better, I think, than a lot of their wins over Kentucky have in the past. One that Auburn really needed on Saturday, and boy, I mean, we felt like this team was close for a long time to getting a victory, and they finally get their first SEC win of the season, and they're obviously hoping can carry some momentum into the month of November.
For sure, it was a 50 years from now, nobody will look back and say, "Boy, that's one of the great wins in Auburn history," or anything like that. But for this team, it was a necessary win, really, and not just to keep their bowl hopes alive, but just to feel better about themselves. I mean, what they've been through this season, I've never seen anything really like it. Losing 4 games the way that they did, losing 2 double-digit fourth quarter leads. But I think, you can look at it that 2 ways. You can say, well, they're just not very good. Or you can say, if you're a player, you look at it and say, we were good enough to beat all those teams. All we got to do is just get it fixed. And I think sometimes fans don't realize that, they've lost 5 games and they're 3-5, but it still matters to those guys who really paid. And I think often overlooked the price they paid to run out of that tunnel on Saturday. And so it was a huge win. I thought it was even bigger because of the fact that they got behind 10-0 and did not seem to be fazed by it. And then obviously they took over the game on the ground, to say the least. It's been a long time since. Well, some of Gus's games were like that, where the team just. When you're talking about, it's one thing to line up and say we're going to hand the ball off 50 times against Alabama A&M. Well, you can do that if you want to, and score a bunch of points. But against a competitive team, to just basically just totally take over the game, and really on both sides of the ball. I mean, until from the time Peyton threw the interception, and I think Kentucky started on like Auburn's 49. They weren't in Auburn's territory again until that drive where they got stopped, the goal line stand, which to me was the most impressive thing that happened. Well, Jarquez gained 278 yards was the most impressive thing, but it was extremely impressive what they did there, and I didn't realize it at the time until he said it. They had 6 freshmen on the field during that goal line stand, which clearly both. I think DJ Durkin is an overlooked story. This defense, they lost their best 2 defensive backs, or 2 of their best ones early, and they have played well enough to put Auburn in position to win the game, and I think that even includes the Georgia game. I thought they were pretty good against Georgia. And to do it under all the circumstances he's under, I think what he's done is pretty remarkable, actually.
Ronnie, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
I agree with you, and I think it bodes really well for the future. I mean, they've got a lot of young guys, and assuming they stay around, this has got a chance to be a pretty good football team for quite a while.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Phillip, I guess, we so much attention to Jarquez Hunter in this game. He's a guy that, us around the program have come to, you come to expect this. He's been, I remember that record-breaking run he had against Alabama State as a freshman. Like, he's been doing this for a while. He's going to finish as one of the better runners in program history in terms of production. But, it's crazy to think, Phillip, he's the only guy left in that class.
Yeah.
that he came in with Auburn. He was a 3-star recruit. Ole Miss, Mississippi State wanted him, but not necessarily like a Tank Bigsby level guy. And it was good to see somebody that, and look, could have left. He's on his 3rd head coach. It was good to see a guy who stuck around. Again, the only guy in his class sort of get his flowers in a massive game like that.
According to what his uncle told me when I did a big story on him back during the summer, I'm not so sure that Mississippi State and Ole Miss were all that interested. And it's interesting how he came to be at Auburn. His uncle knows Will Friends, who is also from Philadelphia, Mississippi. And his uncle called Will Friend and said, I can't figure it out. This kid's not getting much interest. And he's broken all these Mississippi State records. And that's really where it started. And of course, he signed. And I didn't know until doing that story that he's always been an Auburn fan. I mean, he has no connection, but he's just always liked Auburn. And he said once that offer came, it was over. That's where he wanted to go. And so you're right. He's the only one left out of that class, which points to why they have not great margin for error right now.
And for those people who are listening who haven't read that story, they can find it on auburnundercover.com. Phillip posted on the message board a couple of days ago. It's a really good story.
He, the thing about Jarquez is he graduated in actually less than 3 years, which is hard to do. And I don't recall, I guess I could look back at that story and see, but what his major is, but it's not some throwaway major. It's I think he thinks it might be fun to be a forest ranger, he told me. And because he likes that. And of course, right now he wants to play in the NFL. And and he was unbelievable Saturday. But everybody from here on out is going to try their best to come up with a way to keep that from happening to them. And so it's not going to be like that. Probably Saturday against Vanderbilt, it probably won't be like that. Might be like that against Louisiana Monroe, except they probably won't leave him out there long if the game goes as they would hope it will. And but then Texas A&M and Alabama, that's going to be a different animal. They will go in that game intent on not letting him beat them. And if the defense wants to be intent on that, if Alabama or Texas A&M or Auburn or Georgia, if they say we're not letting you run the ball, then you better be able to do something else to get them out of that. And I think Kentucky tried stacking the box last Saturday, and it still didn't do them any good. And great game by Auburn's offensive line, as well as a lot of other people. But I guess what may have been you that I saw a tweet, Nathan, saying that instead of trying to get 300 yards, Jarquez asked out of the game on that last drive.
Yeah, he had that big run. I was gonna say he had that big run in the fourth quarter.
Right.
I
didn't realize this until the other day. That last drive, which started after the interception on the goal line stand, they drove 82 yards without throwing a pass. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And but again, it would be nice to think that you could just say, okay, that's all you got to do. And unfortunately, I think a lot of fans think that, but you can't against better teams. You can't just hand the ball off every down. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Well, to me, I thought it was really, telling that Freeze kind of took a step back after. I mean, I think they opened up three straight passes. And typically, you script those first few plays, 10 to 15 plays. I don't know
Of course,
if they
you
do or
don't
not.
script them from the 8 or wherever it was they were.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Though maybe they should, the way the kickoff's going.
Typically, you'll come out and script your first 10 to 15, no matter, I mean, and I don't know if he does that or not. That's just been my prior experience.
That's what I think most people do. And but I also found it interesting that he said that as the game went on, he said, I wanted to call a pass so bad. He said, but we were just gashing them, and I just figured we better just keep handing it off.
Maybe he should have done that a couple more times this year. They might have a couple more wins.
It's interesting that Jarquez has averaged 15 carries a game. That's what he's averaged. And that includes 4 carries against Alabama A&M when he wasn't needed. Kerryon Johnson averaged 23 carries a game in 2017. The widespread feeling among Auburn fans was that Gus had run Kerryon into the ground. And there's not that much difference. The two that stand out, he had 12 carries against Cal and 12 carries against Arkansas. You would think he would have been a good idea to give it to him more than that in those games. But really for him and his future, I asked Ronnie Brown one time why he decided to come back in 2004, knowing that Cadillac was going to get most of the carries. And he said, actually, that was a benefit. He said, your body's only got so many hits that you can take. And so Jarquez will hopefully get to the NFL without getting beat up and worn down by carrying the ball 25 or 30 times a game. Now, we carried 23 Saturday. Cadillac, as a freshman, had, I want to say 42 carries at Georgia. And you can do that once. And there's the rare guys that can just do it over and over again, but not many. And but I will be surprised if Jarquez is a bigger focus of the offense going forward than he has been. But I still don't think it's going to be what some people would like to see. This is still not a 1970s Auburn team that's going to turn around and hand it off a bunch of times and throw it 12 times. That's not what's going to happen. That's not who Hugh is, for one thing. Now, I do think he gets a bum route. Some people say he just wants to throw it. I don't believe that. I think he wants to be balanced. And they actually weren't all that balanced Saturday. But they did throw – they had the ball a lot, and they did throw 26 passes, which is a decent amount. So, and a lot of – the other thing you have to remember about a lot of those earlier games, in a lot of those games, and particularly the ones with the turnovers, they just didn't have the ball that much. And they had 74 plays Saturday. And some of those games, they had, if I'm remembering right, 40-something, 50-something plays.
Yeah, and they trailed a lot, too. Had to come back.
Do what? Yeah.
I said they trailed a lot, yeah.
You're not going to get as many carries if you don't have many plays. I'm not a mathematician, but I can figure that out. But I think that if you've been around Jarquez, you have to be happy for him because he has never uttered a word of complaint that I've ever heard after a game, during a game, before a game. And in that respect, he reminds me of Trey Mason. They tried, when Trey Mason was a junior, they tried every way in the world to get somebody to beat him out. I don't remember the running back's name from Florida, but he was bigger, and they really wanted him to win the job, but he didn't. But Trey never complained. And Jarquez Saturday reminds me of Trey in the SEC championship game. Though Trey did have 40-something carries in that game. But it was fun to watch, and we'll see how it goes from there. Speaking of Ronnie, changing the subject just for a minute. My old buddy Ted Rue got fired earlier this week.
I had that. I just wrote that down.
Yes, surprise of all surprises, yet again, decided to turn the play call over to somebody else.
They did the same thing last year.
He doesn't. He did it at least 4 times in his 8 seasons at Auburn. He did.
I actually wrote that down before we started that because I figured you'd have a comment on that. It's one of the damnedest things I've ever seen.
I've never seen anything like it. He would say in the same season, he would say it's just too much for the head coach to do. I'm turning it over to whomever, and I feel great about it. And in the same season, he would say, I'm a football coach. That's what I do. That's what I'm going to do. I call the plays, and that's the way it's going to be from now on for the rest of my career. And I think he's already done it once before, except for Florida, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He had somebody else calling the plays last year, and then now he's and he took it over and then started again this season and then turned it over again. So
I've never seen anything like it. And it's, to me, it's like things aren't going well, so let me just start throwing something on the wall and see if it's going to make it better, which it won't. And from what I hear, though, he's taking a lot of heat, and they are used to winning there. They're not used to winning in the Big 12. So
well, that's the difference. Obviously the conference is different, but they have invested. I was down there over the summer, not to see Gus, see somebody else, but they've invested an ungodly amount of money in facilities and all these other things. I mean, the football facility that they built, I want to say he told me it was $140 something million. And you got an indoor and a complex included with all that. I mean, you've got this pool area. You've got it's unbelievable what they've done. I mean, they've tied it in with Disney, and it really looks. I mean, they've done a phenomenal job. So they've got a chance to win. It's a great job. The question is, will he be there to see it through?
But I think sometimes people they don't realize the difference in playing in the Big 12 and the American. I mean, don't get me wrong; those American teams can beat people, as Auburn learned to its dismay in the Peach Bowl. And the Americans, I mean, Houston just beat the dog out of Jimbo and Florida State a couple of years before that happened to Auburn. But when you come to an entire season, it's a whole different thing. And so you look at this team and say, boy, they're really good. They can do this, they can do this. Well, they could, but then they get in a different league, and and then he goes and gets a quarterback who was supposed to be the answer. And turns out he can't throw. And they played 3 other quarterbacks. They can't throw either. And I think Gus's running scheme is really good, but not if they know you're going to run it every time. And
and we've seen the deficiencies in the passing game. We watched that for a number of years, and if you look at what Rhett Lashley's doing at SMU, it looks like to me that he's figured out some of the. I mean, Rhett's a really good coach, really good, really smart guy, but the passing game, just watching SMU, has come a long way from when he was at Auburn, of course.
Well, to be honest, and I do know this from the horse's mouth, Rhett wanted it to come a long way when he was at Auburn.
I think everybody did, but Gus.
Huh?
I think everybody did except Gus.
Yeah, and another coach told me one time, he said, Gus's running scheme is absolutely as good as anybody's in college football. So, but he's still his passing scheme is still the same thing he was doing at Springdale High School. Mm-hmm. And so people sometimes think that spreading it out means you're always going to throw. Well, in his case, he would rather run it than throw it. But anyway, but I do have I do wonder if these latest moves didn't come from above, because he is really catching it from what I hear. And I wonder if he'll, get another buyout.
He very well may. I think it's
$13 million this time. I think that's just chicken feed.
I'm hoping to know more on that situation later today. So,
but I'll give him credit for one thing. In 2005, he was the head coach at Springdale High School. I'm guessing probably making around $100,000 a year or something like that. And since then, as a head coach, he has lost fewer than 4 games one time in 2013, and has gotten incredibly wealthy.
Generational wealth.
Oh, yeah. A couple of generations. I mean, great work if you can get it.
No doubt. Well, Phillips, what are Auburn's chances of getting to a bowl game after the start of the season, and then last week? And
obviously, they definitely need to win Saturday. They don't need to. I thought Louisiana Monroe might be a test based on their record until South Alabama beat them 42-17 Saturday. So that shouldn't be a big test. So if they win Saturday, and if they beat Louisiana Monroe, that'll be 5. And probably it'll all come down to whether they can beat Texas A&M at home. I mean, I don't say they have no chance against Alabama, but Alabama doesn't lose very often in Tuscaloosa.
But I also think it goes Alabama's season is going to be really interesting from here on out, because Nick Saban's not coaching there anymore. And you can look on the field, and I'm not saying Kalen DeBoer can't coach, can't recruit, any of those things, because I think he can do both. But they're clearly not as disciplined on the field as they've been for the past 17, 16 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah, I saw an interesting quote from one player the other day. Said, we need to get back to tucking our shirt tails in, being early for meetings instead of showing up late. And while that doesn't have anything specifically to do with how you perform on a given Saturday, it's still a mindset. And I also think if you're a school like Alabama, you can get yourself in a situation that, well, we're Alabama. We're supposed to win. Well, Vanderbilt didn't buy into that very much. And South Carolina should have beaten them, really. And and Georgia should have beaten them after they came all the way back and took the lead. I just think that it's different. You're right. Now, Nick had a year 2 or 3 years ago where they led the league in penalties too. So that's not the first time that's ever. I think people get this idea that, well, Nick Saban coach teams didn't get penalties.
Well, I think more what I was talking about is really just an overall feel for the program. And I'm looking up there. I'm not ignoring you guys, but I'm looking at the rest of their schedule here. I mean, you're already 6-2, and you've got at LSU, Mercer at home, at Oklahoma, Auburn at home. So, you got to think they could finish 3-1. But if you lose to LSU, and all of a sudden things turn pretty. I mean, you got 3 losses for the first time in a while. 3 losses there in that fan base and dealing with those people is a lot different than 3 losses.
Oh yeah,
pretty much anywhere else.
Well, it's Nick lost 3 games one time, right? 2010, and after his first year. But here's the thing I wonder about. We're getting ahead of ourselves now. But Texas A&M's freshman quarterback reminded me of when Louisville put Lamar Jackson in the game against Auburn in Atlanta, and they couldn't have caught him on a motorbike. And he almost brought him back from being down 31-7, just running the ball. And that's what happened to LSU Saturday too. That Texas A&M freshman quarterback, Reed, they couldn't tackle I mean, they were in good shape in that game. They put him in, and that was it.
Mhm.
So, and even Brian Kelly said after the game, he said, if I was playing us, I'd be focusing on quarterback run because we haven't stopped it. And so I will say this: they better figure something out before next week, because I don't think that Milroe is the Heisman Trophy candidate that people thought he was, but he can dang sure run with it, and that'll be interesting to see. But I agree with you. If Alabama loses another game, I mean, just look at it right now. The 12 playoff teams, the first rendition of the top 12, Alabama's not going to be in it. And who would have ever thought that? I think they've been in it just about every time, and that was with 4.
Mhm.
Or maybe they've been 5 a few times or whatever, but they've always been right there. And but they just don't look the same. They don't look, to me, they don't look as overwhelming as they used to, just pure talent wise.
Well, I agree with you, but I more than that, it is and look, transitions are hard, and it wouldn't have mattered who they brought in there. It was going to be different, and he's got to be his own. And there's a bunch of different philosophies, obviously, but I remember from my experience, I'm sitting in a staff meeting, and we had just gotten in, and the head coach is talking about, this rule and that rule, and all the other assistant coaches, they had different things they wanted to implement. And the head coach sits there and he says, "Listen," he said, "I've got no problem with rules, but somebody's got to enforce those rules." And he said, "The more rules you have to enforce, you got to figure out a way to enforce them. So if you're looking for ways to keep guys off the field, you got to enforce those rules." And so I don't like to have a lot of rules because I don't like to have to enforce them. But there were certain things that certain coaches on the staff felt like, for example, Charlie Strong felt like that players shouldn't be able to wear hats in the building. That was his deal. And so we made that a rule. And those guys stopped wearing hats in the building because when Charlie saw them, he'd unload on them. But there was somebody there to enforce that. If there's not somebody there to enforce those things, especially coming from where they came from the past 16 years, from a guy who is a complete disciplinarian, and all of a sudden things are a little bit loosey-goosey compared to what they're used to.
Yeah.
And you've lived in this state. I'm from here. You're from here. I mean, Nathan, you've been here long enough now. I mean, it is a very, very, very different environment than anywhere else in the country. I don't care what people say. I've lived in a lot of places, been in a lot of places. The intensity of this rivalry, and it's not just football. It's football, it's basketball, it's all sports, it's university wide, it's in every aspect of life here. And I think that's what people miss. And I don't think this has anything to do with DeBoer being a good coach or a good recruiter. I think culturally, can he manage it? And I think that
remains to be seen.
I think that remains to be seen. And I also think it remains to be seen, again, Alabama's schedule doesn't look that hard after you get past LSU. But if you lose to LSU and you implode, it's going to get hot over there.
They got to go to Oklahoma, don't they?
They got to go to Oklahoma.
Now, Oklahoma hadn't been very good, but still. Yeah, I think it's just such a different environment and than any other place I've been. And tens of thousands of people go to see USC play. But a much smaller portion of those people who go live and die with it. They win, they lose, they go home.
Mm-hmm.
And people in this state, and it's not always healthy, but people in this state live and die with it. And I remember Nick, and I give him credit for this. He said, right at first, I don't know that it was his introductory press conference, but early on, he said, our goal is to dominate I don't remember calling it our rival or in-state opponent or whatever, but he was talking about Auburn. And he did, though he did it really less than he did to anybody else.
It should
Auburn, he did not like showing up at Jordan-Hare Stadium. He didn't like that one bit.
He should have lost at least his last two there.
Oh yeah, but he didn't. He dominated them in Tuscaloosa for sure.
No question.
But I think he arrived not like a Jordan Hare Stadium because he was 0-3 there at LSU.
I remember our first year when I was there. I mean, we came in. Of course, we were coaching against players that we'd recruited. Because it was on that staff you had four of us from Auburn that went over there, and we were coaching against a bunch of guys that we knew, and it was emotional. But they were better than we were that first year for sure.
Yeah, Pete Jenkins told me that he said, because Auburn scored a touchdown in the last few seconds when they could have taken a knee, if you remember. Mm-hmm. And he said, that hurt my feelings a little bit. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said, it bothered Nick too. Which I really found that surprising because to me, what difference does it make? And if you don't want them to score, stop them.
Well,
and but losing by one touchdown or two touchdowns or 10 points or 17 points or whatever, just like, to be honest with you, if I'd have been Auburn, I would have scored that last touchdown Saturday just to make it look even better.
I probably would.
But it's really not, Kevin Steele, when he was the head coach at Baylor, they had a game won. They were on the 1 yard line. And instead of taking a knee, they handed it off to try to score, and he fumbled. And whoever they were playing picked it up and ran 99 yards for a touchdown to win the game. So I think even with a 2-score lead, sometimes coaches think, we could fumble. That could happen. They could get an onside kick, and all of a sudden we're fighting for our lives. So they just decided to kill it. That's probably the wise thing to do, just from your own perspective.
So, Phillip, what's your prediction? Bowl game or no bowl game?
It all comes down to me. I believe they'll beat Vanderbilt Saturday. I do. I'm not sure that Vanderbilt is. I mean, they're a wonderful story, and they beat Alabama, and they played Texas close in a game that really wasn't as close as the score, but still, they played them close. They also lost to Georgia State. They had a chance to beat Missouri. They went to overtime. But I still don't think if you match up Auburn and Vanderbilt outside of the quarterback, and maybe the tight end that transferred from New Mexico State, who used to be a quarterback. Outside of those guys, I don't know if they can match up with Auburn, just in terms of talent. Now, they're old. Their offensive line's got a lot of experience, and I do think it'll probably be a good game. But we talked about DJ Durkin earlier. I think he'll have a better plan for Diego than they had last year. I could be wrong, but if they beat Vanderbilt, okay, and then they beat Louisiana Monroe, I think they'll have a really good chance to beat Texas A&M, who does not play as well on the road as they do at home, or hasn't. I think they'll have a really good chance to beat Texas A&M and get to a bowl. That's a lot of ifs, but that's best I can do.
I disagree with you. And the bad thing for Auburn and for Hugh Freeze is if you look at this year and you look at last year, even with all the controversy and all the roster changes and all the other things that have gone on, you ended up with a losing season last year, but you had a chance to win 9 games. And if you look back at this year, you certainly have a chance to win 9 games.
Well, they certainly, at the very least, you would think in 4 games like this that they played, that the 4 they've lost, 4 of the 5 they've lost, that you'd win half those games. Mm-hmm. And you would win, and certainly you would win when you got a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter.
You would think.
They were ahead by 14 in the fourth quarter against Missouri, and according to what I saw, they at that point before that game, they were 105-1 in games when they led by 14 or more in the second half, not just the fourth quarter, the second half. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. I think last year was a big mess. I think he would tell you this, that he was so concerned about rebuilding the roster that he gave too much away. And then when he tried to not take it back, I don't think he ever tried to take it back. But when he tried to get more involved, that didn't work. And I honestly think this team is a good bit better than last year's team. And it may not show in the record, but I think it'll show in the years to come.
Yeah, and I mean, all this experience, assuming these guys stay around, will certainly pay dividends down the road, because those plays that, you know, like 1, 2, 3 plays that can make a difference in the game. The plays that those guys don't make as freshmen, a lot of times they do make as freshmen, as sophomores and juniors and seniors. And so, you know, we used to say, hey, you know, those guys were riding yellow buses 6 months ago. You know, so we
I mean, it's you got to play a significant role as a freshman and have success. You got to be mature beyond your years, and you got to be talented.
Well, then you got to be mature beyond years, physically and mentally and emotionally,
right?
Not just in one of those areas, typically.
Yeah, the fact that Auburn's got a freshman defensive tackle who's probably their best one. The only time I can remember right offhand that being the case was Derek, his freshman year, and but Malik is he's going to be something special, I would think. I saw on something today where whoever was ranking the 10 top defensive line signees in the country in this recruiting class coming up, and the 3 of them are committed to Auburn, and they've signed a bunch of offensive linemen. And really, that's what you got to do. That's where it all begins. Because, you know, like all quarterbacks, Peyton Thorne would be a lot better quarterback if he's not under duress all the time. You know, the offensive line did a really good job against Kentucky. I mean, Jarquez had some very significant holes to run through.
Well, the offensive line is clearly, you know, improved. And, you know, I remember being told for years, and starting a long time ago, you know, when you're putting together a staff, make sure you hire an offensive line coach, a defensive line coach, and a secondary coach. Not that the others aren't important, but if you don't have those 3, you're in trouble.
Right. Well, coaching running backs, coaching wide receivers, that's different. I mean, but for a freshman to excel in the trenches where it's really violent, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know, they're not as good as you'd like them to be on pass protection. I mean, the interception, at least to a significant extent, was called because Dylan Wade, who was a good player, just completely whiffed on their outside pass rusher. I mean, he didn't even touch him, and he hit Peyton right in the back. I'm not sure Peyton ever even knew he was coming. He had time before that to get rid of the ball, and he should have. But you just never know. I mean, apparently on the interception, a receiver just absolutely screwed up his route. And two, well, I wasn't going to mention his name. I was going to be nice.
Freeze mentioned his name, so
two of the at least 2 of the interceptions Peyton thrown hit Cameron Coleman right in the hands and got knocked up in the air. So it's not. My point is, all interceptions are not the fault of the quarterback.
100%.
I mean,
although
the stats say
bad decisions.
The stats say they're an interception. Then I don't know when he got his arm hit. And those things happen at every level of football sometimes. But to his credit, he's only had 3 interceptions since then. And one of them was gigantic against Oklahoma. But which I thought, if you watch that replay of that game, it was really a good defensive call. The linebacker who intercepted the pass was right up on the line of scrimmage, and he hit the guard. He hit the guard on the snap, and then just turned around and ran back to where he was, and it got thrown right to him. So, and I still hadn't figured out how somebody didn't catch him.
Yeah, Cam Coleman almost did.
Yeah, like the one. Yeah,
came from the other side of the field to do it.
Well, Phillip, before we wrap up, let's talk a little basketball. Considering the success of the Auburn and Alabama basketball programs recently at the same time, is this the golden age of college basketball in the state of Alabama?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I remember in 1985 when Auburn and Alabama played in the SEC tournament championship game. And for all the people that covered the SEC, it was like, well, isn't this cute? Auburn and Alabama getting to do this. And going now to be fair, Whip Sanderson, he never could get past the Sweet 16, but he got to the Sweet 16.
He got there more than once.
And I think like 7 times. Mm-hmm. And of course, between Sonny Smith, who went to 5 straight NCAA tournaments at Auburn, between Sonny Smith and Hugh Freeze, Bruce Pearl, there's some dark days for Auburn basketball in there.
Yeah, Cliff Ellis had some good years, but certainly,
two.
Yeah.
Out of 10, he had a winning SEC record too. Now he went to the Sweet 16 with a team that was 8-8 and got in only because of Georgia getting in trouble and having to not go. And so that Auburn got in because of that as a 10 seed and went to the Sweet 16 and took Syracuse to the eventual national championship in Albany, New York. Took them to the last minute. So yeah, that's fair. Man, he's an old hurts. Cliff, even when they weren't good for the most part, when they weren't in the tournament or whatever, they were still pretty good. He had a lot of 7 and 9 SEC records.
Which at that point in time was
but where it is now, it's a completely different place now. And I think mainly because of Bruce Pearl, because I think that when Auburn went to the Final Four, like I said, we've lived in this state for a long time, Ronnie, and all those big dog Alabama people weren't going to have that. They weren't going to have it. And they apparently made a really good hire in Nate Oates and made a commitment to it. And now Alabama and Auburn are picked 1 and 2 in the preseason in the SEC, and I'm pretty certain that has never happened.
It's pretty phenomenal. And look, there's been a lot of things at Auburn too. I mean, for all the mistakes in football that Auburn made during basketball's rise, that you look at the Bruce Pearl hire, you look at the new arena, and all the things that I remember you telling the story, Bobby Louder getting involved in the arena construction, and when Auburn gets committed, Auburn typically wins and does pretty well.
Oh yeah.
And Auburn is clearly committed to basketball.
They definitely. But here's the thing to me, and I think people don't like it when I make this comparison, but I think it's a valid comparison. When Bruce Pearl walked in the door, he had an 0-18 SEC team. I mean, he really did. He had a team that wasn't going to win a game. And he had one good player. And he went and scrounged up a few transfers, which was harder then than it is now. And they weren't good. They weren't very good, but they competed a lot. And then but he went 3 years before First 2 years he had to lose an overall record. His first 3 years he had to lose an SEC records. Didn't go anywhere. Didn't go to the NIT. Didn't go anywhere. And then they get in the tournament and get crushed by Clemson, partly because Bryce Young was playing hurt. He was nowhere near himself, but still, they got crushed by Clemson, and then the next year they went to the Final Four. And but even in those 3 years when they did not win, they filled that arena up for every game, which speaks to Bruce Pearl's personality and his ability to sell himself and sell his program. And then Alabama went and got Nate Oates, and this is going to be an interesting season to me. I mean, I think fans better get ready. The Auburn's pre-conference schedule is brutal. It's brutal. They're going to probably lose several of those games. But Alabama had a similar schedule last year and didn't win any of them. And they were still a fourth seed. It helps you play those games. Mm-hmm. Now, you'd like to win your share of them. But, for instance, if you play Connecticut and Hawaii, pretty good chance you won't win. Play at Duke, pretty good chance you won't win. I mean, it's no matter how good you are. And so it's going to be interesting to watch that. But the SEC, 9 SEC teams in the top 25, I can assure you that's never happened.
No.
Well, I think, this is a little bit off topic, and Phillip, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, but, Jay Jacobs is a very, is a target for for a lot of Auburn people. And in a lot of ways, for good reason. But in other ways, people talk about Gene Chizik and how it ended, but, Gene Chizik
won a championship along the way.
And a Heisman Trophy candidate and a conference championship. And then, you look at and Jay, again, and I'm not saying that he was perfect because there were certainly some questionable decisions, but he hired Bruce Pearl. And coming off of –
and that took some guts. That really took some guts. Hired a guy who was still on a show cause. That took some guts. After I hired him, Jay told me, he said, if this doesn't work, he said, I guess we just need to plant a big garden over there where that arena is, because if this doesn't work, I don't know what will. And but that's true. And Gene Chizik deserves credit, not only for that team going 14-0 and winning the national championship and having the Heisman Trophy winner and having the best defensive player in the country, probably, and Nick Fairley. But maybe Gene doesn't deserve that much credit for that. But anyway, he deserves credit for that. And also for holding that team together when all the crap started about Cam.
And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I think that, again, I'm not – certainly 2012 was a disaster, whatever and I'm not defending any of that. But if you really look at – and look, time gives everybody perspective. And Jay certainly has a mixed record. But I don't think that he gets enough credit for Bruce Pearl. And again, people look at how Gene Chizik ended. Would you trade? Look, and Auburn bounced back. You look at 2013. So would you trade 2012 for a national championship, a Heisman Trophy winner, a conference championship?
I think most people would. I think most people would. But having said that, he did just as bad a job of holding that team together as he did do a good job of holding the 2010 team together. The infamous security guards outside of players' residences, that really hurt him with his own players.
Yes.
Really hurt him.
And the book he wrote, not giving anybody credit but himself.
Right.
Not anything either.
Darren Bates, I was trying to think who it was, told me one time. Darren Bates was married and had a baby. Mm-hmm. And he needed some diapers. And it was like midnight. So he goes out to get in the car, go to Walmart and get some diapers, like any of us would do, like Nathan will someday do. And the security guard told him, well, you can't go. you can't leave. And he told the security guard, so he said, you watch. And he went to the store and got some diapers. I mean, come on. And that hurt him with his players. One of the more memorable things that happened to me in 2012 was T.J. Jackson was an academic advisor, former All-SEC Auburn defensive tackle, now college professor, with like a whole bunch of degrees. But anyway, they were building the parking deck that is next to the football complex, the old football complex. So we couldn't park there where we usually park. We had to park across the street, and I guess across Sanford. And the quickest way to get there was to walk through the academic building. And TJ's office was just right there. You walk right past it. And he was sitting in there, and I just said, how you doing? He said, great. He just had a baby, and he was just all excited. And this was the week after Arkansas, who had lost by a combined 100 points to Texas A&M and Alabama when John L. Williams was the the interim coach, and beat Auburn 24-7 after outscored them 17-0 in the fourth quarter. I said to TJ, I said, that was a rough one Saturday, wasn't it? And he said, yeah, that was real rough. I said, well, maybe they'll beat Ole Miss Saturday. They played at Ole Miss the next Saturday. And he said, Phillip, they're not going to beat Ole Miss. I said, why not? Ole Miss isn't that good. He said, fully half this team wants the head coach gone, and they'll do whatever it takes to get rid of him. And when I heard that, I said, this team is freaking doomed.
Well, and I remember we talked about, you and I talked extensively about, could he get fired 2 years after winning the national championship and beginning that, those first few losses, look bad, but
well, yeah, they had a chance to beat LSU.
But when they lost to Vandy on the road, you and I talked that next Sunday, and we were both pretty much in agreement. This is going to be painful, but it's not going to work, and it certainly did.
No, and and another thing is the year before 2011, they went 8-5, but they got completely blown away 4 times. I mean, just not even in the game. And then, of course, in 2012, when Texas A&M, there's some amazing statistics from the end of the 2012 season that I still remember. Their opponents, in the first halves of those games, their opponents had the ball 18 times, scored 16 touchdowns, killed the clock on one, and Alabama fumbled inside the 5-yard line on another one. But 16 out of 18. And the starting quarterback for Texas A&M, who beat them 63-21, Georgia, who beat them 38-0, and Mark Richt being a good guy, I have never seen a team try harder not to score than Georgia. But they were ahead 28-0 at the half, and they just absolutely just tried to get it over. And then get beat 49-0 by Alabama. And if they don't fumble going into the end zone, it's 56-0, which would have been the worst Iron Bowl loss ever. I wrote my column that day in the Bryant-Denny Stadium press box about saying it's over. Mm-hmm. It's over. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the final score of this game is. It's over.
And I think we both knew that after the Vandy game, because, like you say, I mean, it was pretty clear that at least half the team had quit, if not more. I mean, they won.
And another thing about those 3 games, no starting quarterback played in those 3 games played beyond the first series of the third quarter for the other team. I mean, Texas A&M could have scored 100 points. There's no doubt. And it was 42-7 at the half, and it was just wasn't any game. And the real irony is that Auburn beat all 3 of those teams in 2013. Yeah. After getting just completely obliterated by them in 2012. They beat all three of them in 2013.
And it's funny, Auburn has a history of that. If you look at 1992, I think it was 5-6, I think, if I remember correctly. And
5-6 in 91 and 5-1 in 92.
That's right. And then you turn around, you go 11, or Terry wins his first 20 games, he goes 11-0, and you look at 2003 and Jetgate and that whole deal, and you turn around the next year.
2003 was the most underachieving Auburn team I think I've ever seen, because they had all those same players that went undefeated in 2004, plus Carlos Dansby, Spencer Johnson, Reggie Torbor, 2 or 3 offensive linemen. They had all the same players that were starters in 2003 that really was only tested one time in 2004. And it was it's funny to me that head coaches think they become experts on both sides of the ball when they get to be head coaches. And not only he named Hugh Freeze offensive coordinator and hired Steve Ensminger to call the plays, and told him, which might not have been all that bad if Hugh had been allowed to run his own offense. He still claims that he averaged 28 points a game because they scored 28 against Alabama and 28 against Wisconsin in the Music City Bowl after he wiped the whole board clean and said, I may get fired, but I'm doing it my way the rest of the season.
And he did.
And it was that team, the 2018 team, really should have been a really good team. And I think it would have been if Gus would have just left Chip alone and not driven Jarrett Stidham slap crazy. But you never know. I mean, it's and so much depends, confidence. That's why I think that was such a big win for Auburn Saturday, just to have some confidence. Because it's hard to keep having confidence if every time you go out there you think you got it won and then you don't.
Well, especially with as many young players, we've talked about this over and over, but especially with that many young players,
yeah.
I think people. And I was having a conversation with my mother, who is who loves Auburn and is a football fanatic, football and basketball, and hates Alabama almost as much as she loves Auburn. But she was. I was trying to explain to her yesterday that it's hard to build chemistry when you've got that many freshmen, you've got transfers. You've got a coaching staff that came in last year, and half those guys are new again this year. And you inherited I don't even know what to call the potato era. But when you look at all those things, and again, I'm not excusing some of the calls.
Well, they've lost the games they should have won. There's no question about it. Here's the thing, Ronnie, and I think you'll agree with this. It's not always so easy to sit and watch from afar and know whether something that happens was a bad call, or if a player messed it up, or if the defense just won.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the defense is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's some really good defensive coordinators over there. So, but I mean, there'll never be an excuse for the way they played against New Mexico State last season.
No.
I mean, the Alabama game, which of the most disheartening Auburn losses, that one would have to be really close to the top.
Well, and 2 years before that, it's not far behind it.
Yeah, but at least 2 years before that, Alabama got the ball at their own 3-yard line and drove 97 yards to win the game.
Yeah.
So you have to give Alabama credit for that. Jalen Milgrove threw a good pass to an open receiver last year, so I'll give him that. But the fact of the matter is, and everybody believes it's because they only rushed 2 people, and I agree they probably should have rushed more. But DJ Williams is supposed to backpedal all the way to the end zone and just don't let him get behind you. Instead, he gets up there and tries to play tight man coverage and he gets beat. But Zach Etheridge was supposed to be there waiting too. And for whatever reason, he just ran the wrong way. So all of a sudden you got one-on-one coverage and
you get what you got.
And so I'm not defending rushing two, okay? I'm not defending that, especially considering they had harassed him the whole game, and he had not responded very well to it.
No, and hadn't responded well to the noise. And at that point in time, it was pretty loud in there because I was there. I mean,
it was tremendously loud, and that was just a. But I'll also say, if you're beat on that play, then you got to get over there and tackle his butt. Don't let him catch the ball. Give him another chance from 15 yards closer, but don't let him catch the ball.
Yep.
And now we've gotten all that out of the way. But what I was actually saying a while ago about the comparison, what Bruce inherited and what Hugh inherited are very, very similar situations, as in hardly any players. Hugh had more, I guess, than you had more, I guess, than Bruce did, but you got to have a lot more in football, and he didn't have enough. He had a handful of good players, but it's just, and yet they could have won 9 games last year. And when this season's over, you might say that they should have won more this year. I mean, you're obviously going to say they should have won more this year. But in the big picture, y'all will have to excuse me. The cat caught in my closet.
I hear him. Or her.
Yeah. She was getting mad.
Put her on.
That's what she gets for sneaking in there. But as for the future, I think there's a whole lot of encouraging signs.
I'd have to agree with you.
And that will especially be true if they're able to finish with some semblance of momentum going down the stretch here.
Yeah.
And I think they had to win Saturday to make that much of a possibility.
And hey, look, people right now and at the beginning of the season probably didn't have a lot of hope for Auburn. Hasn't been competitive in Tuscaloosa in a long time.
This is different. They can. The last time they were competitive was 2014 in that 55-44 game.
And if you look at, again, if Auburn's able to build on the momentum from last week and Alabama stumbles against LSU in this state, who knows?
Well, then, if Auburn was to get there with 5 losses, if Auburn was to get there 6-5, and Alabama was to get there 8-3, there's not a whole big bunch of difference between, and if Auburn can do that, then they will get there believing they can win.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they can, but it's just hard for me to expect that, considering what they've done in Tuscaloosa since 2010, which is nothing.
And they've had spurts. I feel like they've had spurts where they've been more competitive.
No, I'm talking about the Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 2016, a couple interceptions in the first half, hung around. The Cadillac team hung around. They were never able to.
Cadillac team caused Nick Saban to say they ran plays I haven't seen since junior high school, and he wasn't being critical. It was just they were just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
That was the finish of that season was really pretty fun under all the circumstances after Cadillac took over, and it wasn't fun before that.
Well, Phillip, we've enjoyed it. You got another week?
Always. And an hour and 4 minutes.
And we'll see y'all.
Y'all have a great night.